I've produced a new document for you which will be very helpful for you for answering the question 4, the reliability question that carries 10 marks. Basically, it's a top tips document. You can open the document and read it, download it and read it. It's on the homepage of Frog. I won't take you through the minute details in this podcast, but I'll just highlight some of the key things that you need to be aware of. So first of all, propaganda. Make sure you spell the word correctly. It has got 3 A's in it, so learn the correct spelling of that. Basically the point is, if a source has been produced by the government targeted at the people as a whole, with the purpose of misleading the people of the country, then that is what we call propaganda, often produced in times of war to keep morale high, and there's that key word, morale. So extremely likely that in the examination the one or more of the sources will be propaganda sources produced by the government to raise morale. You'll see the point there that propaganda, although unreliable and by its nature it is biased, it is one-sided, that does not mean it is not useful. The whole purpose of propaganda, from a historian's point of view, is we're learning about the techniques that the government is using to influence people's behaviour. It helps us understand why people behave the way they did in a war situation. So there's plenty you can talk about propaganda. I've done a little paragraph there for you about official reports. I've made the point, be careful here. Sometimes you see something produced by the government and it might not be propaganda. Not everything produced by the government in a time of war is propaganda. Sometimes the government may commission somebody to produce a report for them. So it's information that the government will use to make decisions. Now, an official report is not produced for the people of the country as a whole to look at. It is produced for a small group of government people to get a picture of what the truth was so they can make decisions. So official reports are usually very, very accurate and very, very reliable, because the purpose of an official report was to put together accurate and balanced, well-researched information to help the government make decisions. So again, you will need to develop that point. Always look at the provenance. Always make sure you're comfortable about the purpose of the source. Often in the exam you may get what we call memoirs. As you can see there, memoirs are books written by the people who were involved, often the famous people. Often government leaders will write a memoir, but they write them many years after the events. Often they write them when they're old, the end of their life is approaching, and the purpose always comes down to purpose. The purpose of memoirs is so that they will be remembered for the good things they did. So by definition, memoirs are what we call self-serving. The purpose is to be remembered well, so therefore they will leave out their failures. They will forget to mention, or they will deliberately not mention, the things that went wrong. So by definition, therefore, memoirs are often unbalanced. They're often one-sided. And remember, a one-sided account is a biased account. Okay, so again, look out for that. Those types of sources in the examination. The next one are historians. Very, very likely you're going to get a source that's written by a historian. Generally speaking, if a source is written by a historian, then it is likely to be a reliable source. Again, it comes down to purpose. The purpose of a historian is to establish the truth. It's the historian's job. The historian's job is to write a balanced and reliable account. Because they were not involved in the events, they're not likely to want to twist the truth. So they will try to write it as it was. So if you're looking at a source that's written by a historian, emphasise the fact that it is likely to be reliable, because the historian's job is to be reliable. So again, we're just moving on to the second page of the document here. That makes the point, the purpose when writing their book. Okay, they will have different purposes. Some historians may want to write a political history, an economic history, depending on the focus of their book. So try to develop a point about the purpose of historians. The next one are diaries. Yes, they are usually reliable. They can usually be trusted because the person writing the diary, why would they lie? They're writing it for themselves. But the point of emphasis here is that they may unconsciously be biased. Okay, they may, there's that key word. If, for example, somebody writing the diary has been influenced by propaganda, or they've listened to a rumour, or that somebody's told them something that is not true, and they have believed it, and they write it down in their diary, then without realising it, their diary is giving unreliable information. So it depends. So don't just assert, don't just go in and say, this is a diary, it must therefore be reliable. Make sure you talk through those points. A word about newspapers. Get an extract that is a newspaper. Remember, in war, particularly in World War I and World War II in Britain, newspapers were subject to government control about censorship. They had a responsibility to keep morale high. And so therefore they would report the news in a biased way. Use your knowledge, use your precise knowledge on that. So, for example, mention it, if it's World War I, mention the Defence of the Realm Act, that it put controls over newspapers. If it's World War II, mention the government ministry, the Ministry of Information, that controlled what newspapers could write, but use your precise knowledge on that. Finally, I've included a table, and you work your way through this, about which sums up some of the pitfalls. Candidates in the exam can say awful things, so I've listed on the left hand side what not to say. Okay, so I put a series of little quotes. Do not under any circumstance say those things. Okay, so the first one, source A is not reliable because it was written at the actual time of the events it describes. You want to scream, you want to cry out, do not say that. It is not that simple. Sometimes a source from the time can be accurate, but equally a source from the time can be biased. It depends on the purpose of the author. For example, an eyewitness to the events may be reliable because he saw the events firsthand. On the other hand, if he was directly involved in the events, he may have a reason to distort the truth. Another one, source A is not reliable because it was written many years after the events that it describes. Never say that. That's again, it is not that simple. Sometimes a source from many years later can be reliable. Obvious example is a historian, but on other occasions, a source many years later may have forgotten the details. It depends on that particular person. So whether it's written, if it's written a long time after the event, it may be reliable, it may be unreliable. It depends on those factors. The next one, source A is useful because it has lots of details. Again, I've put R in there. Never ever say that. Details are not what the historian is looking for. Some details may be accurate, in which case that's useful. Other details may be wrong. So, somebody may write down inaccurate details, in which case those details can't be trusted, they are unreliable. Historians want to have accurate information. So again, I've explained that point there. So just read through that and make sure you don't, whatever you do, say that sort of thing. Another one, never say something simplistic like source A is accurate because it is a photograph. Photographs can be forged. They can be framed, posed. I mean, think about it. If a historian in 500 years' time found your family album, and the historian said, "Oh, families were all very, very happy in the year 2015," well, that historian has made a mistake. by definition, people will smile for family photograph albums. People will look happy. You don't go around taking photographs of people having arguments, or at least most people don't. So it does depend. So just avoid making those simplistic comments that because it is a photograph, it is accurate. Often, particularly in history, photographs are taken for propaganda reasons. They're posed. It is not necessarily the case. Something else may be happening off camera that is not going to be published. Finally, source A is unreliable because it is biased, full stop. Right? No, always develop your point about bias. Explain why it is biased by explaining its purpose. Okay? So, for example, you say source A is unreliable because it is biased, full stop, and then there's another couple of sentences there. This is because it is a piece of propaganda that the government has produced in order to raise morale, and so on and so on and so on. You develop your point. Never finish an answer with the word biased. You must develop it. So hopefully those are top tips. I could include many more, but they are the common pitfalls that you need to avoid. Hopefully that was useful to you.